My name is Sidir Clara Sandy, and today I would like to presentations about my English drama assignment. Okay, famous player writer in Greek theater. Aristophanes, the most famous writer of Greek comedies, was born in the 440s before Common Era. He lived through the upheaval of the Peloponnesian War, which lasted from 431 to 404, and stripped Athens of her place as cultural and political capital of the Greek city-state. Many of his plays comment on her long work. Perhaps the most famous is Lysistrata, whose heroine leads a sex strike in order to bring about peace. He often made fun of tragedy and the tragedians. Aristophanes' Frogs is the one of the best ancient critics of the other playwrights that we still have. He produced his first play in 427 before his death in 380s. He had written 44 comedies, of which we have 11. Okay, the famous playwright in Greek theaters number 2 is Aeschylus. The first great tragedian, Aeschylus, was born around 525 before Common Era. He produced his first drama in 498, and he had his first victory in 484. We know he was still working in 458 when he produced his trilogy Oresteia. Okay, Aeschylus actually fought in the front lines against the Persians at Marathon in 490. We don't know much about the rest of his life, but we do know that his Persians, financed by Pericles, was such a success that he was invited to Sicily by Hieron of Syracuse to restage it. He died in Sicily, having returned there sometimes after 458. His tombstone mentioned that he was an Athenian and that he fought at Marathon, but does not mention his play. His life preached that archaic and classical ages, and Aeschylus' plays reflects that fact. Considered even by the ancients to be difficult and old-fashioned, Aeschylus was also quite innovative in the structures, personal, and even subjects of his play. He wrote around 89 plays, of which we have only 7. Okay. The origins of tragedy. The exact origins of tragedy or tragoida are debated among scholars. Some have linked the rise of the genre to an earlier art form, the lyrical performance of epic poetry. Others suggest a strong link with the rituals performed in the worship of Dionysius, such as the sacrifice of gods, a song ritual called tragodia, and the wearing of masks. Indeed, Dionysus became known as the god of the theater, and perhaps there is another connection, the drinking rites which result in the worshippers losing full control of their emotion and in effect becoming another person's, much as actor Hippocrates hoped to do when performing. The music and the dance of Dionysiac ritual was most evident in the role of the chorus and the music provided by an aulus player. But rhythmic elements were also preserved in the use of verse, trochaic, tetrameter, and the iambic trimeter in the delivery of the spoken word. Okay, how they perform the drama at the Greek theater. Okay, all actors were male in ancient Greek theater, though there were numerous female characters in the plays of the period. Performers typically play a large number of different roles in a single play. As the actors were small in size when viewed by a large audience up a hillside, it is likely the acting was presentational in style, with deliberately large action and gesture, similar to those seen in modern-day operas. Early works involve one actor and a chorus of women played by men. There were many parts in this plays, but they were all performed by a single actor. The first actor was a performer named Thespis. This is why actors today are sometimes known as thespians. The chorus in ancient Greek tragedies most likely consisted of 15 people. The chorus normally performed in unison, but was sometimes divided into two semi-chorus, perhaps speaking alternate lines or dividing up speeches. The chorus leader, choragus, occasionally spoke individual lines. Thought the chorus typically spoke or sang as a group. Okay. The chorus usually enter the orchestra immediately after the prologue, at the beginning of the play, and remain on stage until the play's conclusion. The chorus serve many functions, chief among these being to express opinions and to give advice to character in the drama. The chorus was sometimes seen as another spectator, reacting to the action from the side, like the audience. Okay, this is the amphitheater. The amphitheater, also spelled amphitheater, freestanding building of round or more often oval shape with central area, the arena, and seats concentrically placed around it. The word is Greek meaning theater with seats on all sides. But as an architectural from the amphitheater is of Italical or Etrusco companion origin and reflects the requirements of the specific forms of entertainment that these people created. Gladiatorial games and Venetian contests of beasts with one another, or of men with beasts. Originally, such games took place in the forum, and the wooden stands were erected from time to time to accommodate the spectator. The earliest permanent extant amphitheater is one at Pompeii. Okay, at 980 before Common Era, in which the arena is sunk below the natural level of the surrounding ground. It is built of stone 455 by 341 feet and seated approximately 2,000 spectators. Okay. The Dionysius group is the god of the grape harvest, winemaking and wine, of fertility or charts and fruit, vegetations, insanity, ritual madness, religious ecstasy, festivity, and theater in ancient Greek religions and myth. Okay, and then this is the famous playwright in Elizabethan theater, George Chapman. George Chapman was born around 1000s, George Chapman was born around 1559 in the town of Hitchin in Hertfordshire, near London. He was the second son of Thomas and John Chapman. Little is known of his early life except that he attended Oxford in 1574, but left before completing his degrees. From 1583 through 1585, he was in the household of Sir Ralph Sadler, although his exact positions there is somewhat unclear. It seems that Chapman served in the military in 1591 and 1592, but returned to London prior to 1594. Chapman's earliest drama, The Blind Beggar of Alexandria, was produced in 1596, and he quickly gained a reputation as a talented playwright. Chapman wrote approximately 21 plays between 1596 and 1613, but his output was very sporadic. Some years he wrote no plays, instead concentrating his efforts on translating the poetry of Homer. Chapman experienced financial troubles throughout his life and spent some time in debtor's prison. His fortune changed for a brief time in 1603 when he was given a position in the household of the young priest Henry. Henry undertook sponsorship of the Hammer Project. During this time, Chapman also wrote plays for the children of the Cape, and the company produced Chapman's most famous tragedies, Bazzi, the Amboys, and two plays on Piron. When Henry died in 1612, Chapman once again found himself in financial trouble. Very little is known about the last 20 years of his life. He died on May 12, 1634. Okay. And then the work of William Shakespeare. Okay. All's well that ends well. Okay. Summary. Helen hails the King of France, and the King grants her permissions to marry Bertram, the man she loves. Bertram rejects her and leaves a list of the tasks that she must do to have him acknowledge their marriage. She follows him to Italy, completes all the tasks, and Bertram accepts her as his wife. Okay, and then Parolles is the one of the character in this plays, in this William Shakespeare's works. Parolles is a loud-mouthed, dirty-minded braggart of a soldier, extremely overdressed and able to convince the unwary that he is an extraordinary soldier, thought he is, in fact, a great coward. Okay, Hamlet. The second work is Hamlet. The ghost of the King of Denmark tells his son Hamlet to avenge his murder by killing the new king. Hamlet's uncle, Hamlet's page madness, contemplates life and death and seeks revenge. His uncle, fearing for his life, also devises plots to kill Hamlet. The play ends with a duel during which the king, queens, Hamlet's opponents, and Hamlet himself are all killed. Okay. Hamlet is the Prince of Denmark, the little character, and the protagonist. About 30 years old at the start of the play, Hamlet is the son of the Queen Gertrude and the lad King Hamlet, and the nephew of the present king, Claudius. Hamlet is the melancholy, bitter, and cynical full of hatred for his uncle's scheming and disgust for his mother's sexuality. A reflective and thoughtful young man who has studied at the University of Wittenberg, Hamlet is often intensive and hesitant, but at other times prone to rash and impulsive acts. Okay, the condition. Okay, the condition of England in the Black Death plague. The Black Death had a catastrophic impact as it swept across Europe in the 1340s, and it remains the deadliest pandemic in human history. Between 30 until 50% of the population in Europe was killed. England was not excluded from his high death toll and the devastating impacts of such a pandemic. Number one, the death toll. The pestilence arrived in England in 1348. The first recorded case was from a seaman in the southwest who had recently arrived from France. The plague hit, the plague hit Bristol, a dense population center, shortly afterward, and had reached London by the autumn. Number two, the economic consequence. The economic effects of the Black Death were huge. Unlike beaver, labor was in huge demand, which meant peasants could go where the pay and conditions were best. For the first time, the balance of power was shifting in the directions of the poorest in society. In the immediate aftermath, the cost of labor increased. Okay, so how do you solve the problem? Unlike other countries in Europe, England coped with this change in circumstances. The administration proved itself to be relatively effective at managing difficult times. However, the rise in the wage was met with immense resistance by the gentry. In 1381, the introduction of a poll tax sparked all-out rebellion. Led by Wat Tyler, the peasants marched on London and ramped through the city. Although this rebellion was eventually quelled and Wat Tyler killed, it was a landmark point in English history. For the first time, the ordinary people of England had risen up against their overlords and demanded greater rights. The memory of the peasants' revolt loomed large for those who lived through it. Serfdom was abolished shortly afterwards. It would not be the last revolution in England. The effects of the Black Death and the change in the relationship between workers and their overlords affected politics for several subsequent centuries. Okay, obstacle in the Elizabeth period. Queen Elizabeth's right to the throne wasn't always guaranteed. Her father, King Henry VIII, had Parliament annul his marriage to Elizabeth's mother, his second wife, Anne Boleyn, thus making Elizabeth an illegitimate child and removing her from the line of succession. Also, a later parliamentary act would return her to it. After Henry's death in 1547, two of Elizabeth's half-siblings would sit on the throne. First, the young Edward VI, who reigned for 6 years, and then Mary I, Bloody Mary, who reigned for 5 years. Suspicious that her half-sister would try to seize power, Mary placed Elizabeth under what amounted to constant surveillance, even jailing her in the Tower of London for a short period of time. Elizabeth skillfully avoided doing anything that Mary might have used as ground for her executions, and upon Mary's death in 1558, went on to become one of England's most illustrious monarchs. Okay, so what is the Puritans? The Puritans were members of a religious reform movement known as a Puritanism that arose within the Church of England in the late 16th century. They believed the Church of England was too similar to the Roman Catholic Church and should eliminate ceremonies and practice not rooted in the Bible. Okay, why the Puritans had the theater? The Puritans disapproved of many things in Elizabeth's society, and one of the things they had most was the theater. Their chief complaint was that secular entertainments distracted people from worshiping God. Thus, they also felt that the theater's increasing popularity symbolized the moral inequality of city life. Okay, the theater in Elizabeth period. Properties were occasionally carried onto the platform stage, but from extant list it is obviously that they were few in number. Some properties were so cumbersome that they remained on stage throughout a performance. Smaller properties were probably revolved in the discovery space, and servants carried some properties on and off. It appears that the audience was not concerned by the scenic inconsistencies. All of the theater buildings were round, square, or octagonal, with thatched roof covering the structure surrounding an open courtyard. Spectators, depending on how much money they had, could either stand in the yard, which may have sloped toward the stage, sit on bench in the galleries that went around the greater parts of the wall, sit in one of the private boxes, or sit on a stool on the stage proper. Okay, the Renaissance period. The Renaissance was a fervent period of Europe culture, artistic, political, and economic rebirth. Following the Middle Ages, generally describing as taking place from the 15th century to the 16th century, the Renaissance promoted the rediscovery of classical philosophy, literature, and art. Some of the greatest thinkers, authors, statesmen, scientists, and artists in human history thrived during this era, while global exploration opened up new lands and culture to Europe commerce. The Renaissance is credited with bridging the gap between the Middle Ages and the modern day civilizations. Okay. The first, from darkness to light, the Renaissance began. During the Middle Ages, a period that took place between the fall of ancient Rome in 476 and the beginning of the 14th century, Europeans made few advances in science and art, also known as the Dark Ages. The era is often branded as a time of war, ignorance, famine, and pandemics such as the Black Death. Some historians, however, believe that such grim depictions of the Middle Ages were greatly exaggerated, though many agree that there was relatively little regard for ancient Greek and Roman philosophies and learning at the time. Okay, the second one is humanism. During the 14th century, a cultural movement called humanism began to gain momentum in Italy. Among its many principles, humanism promoted the idea that man was the center of his own universe, and people should embrace human achievement in education, classical art, literature, and science. In 1450, the inventions of the Gutenberg printing press allowed for improved communication throughout Europe and for ideas to spread more quickly. As a result of his as a result of this advance in communication, little known texts from early humanism authors such as those by Francesco Petrarch and Giovanni Boccaccio, which promoted the renewal of traditional Greek and Roman culture and values, were printed and distributed to the masses. Additionally, many scholars believe advance in international finance and trade impacted culture in Europe and set the stage for the Renaissance. And then the three, Medici family. The Renaissance started in Florence, Italy, a place with a rich cultural history where wealthy citizens could afford to support painting artists. Member of the power Medici family, which ruled Florence for more than 60 years, were famous bakers of the movement. Okay, so that's all about my English drama assignment. If you have any questions or opinion, you can comment down below. Bye guys, see you in the other video.